how come you design teams by, we look at their resume and we will look at what they've done. And yet when we look at their thinking styles, they have very similar thinking styles. I said, how are we going to come up with innovation if everybody has the same thinking style and no complementary and understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses? It's funny. A lot of teams I go in and I referee that they're having difficulty because they have very similar thinking styles. So there's a clash there quite often because they're arguing at that same point. We can't get past it. Keep telling them we need to have balancing within the teams.
So I'd like to kind of just welcome you to the show, right? To the episode. And, usually whenever we start, I usually like asking people, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me, but as I was doing my research and I wrote down everything that I could find from your bio and everything that you have done. And I think I almost want to ask you, what haven't you done?
That would be easier to explain. Yeah.
Right. Because here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a lot of things here. You've been in the television or like the TV business, being a cameraman. You went into engineering and computer. Then you are in the music world and kind of have been for a long time. You've been creating like fan experiences at the NFL. You've done consulting for the about the Canadian healthcare system, affordable housing, global warming. You are currently a professor, right, at York University's Schulich School of Business for creativity and innovation. Is there anything else that I have missed?
Yeah, there's a lot you've missed, but that's okay because we can discover it during this conversation. Yeah, I didn't even talk about I started out as a rock star, but that's going to be a whole other episode, I think.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I got interested in all of it.
Yeah, but like, what is it like? How did you get to here? Like, how basically just give me a little bit of a quick story about how you became from like the rock world where you started, right, and ended up teaching creativity and innovation, at York University.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny to me. It seems like when somebody looks at my my career path, it looks like it's a winding road into so many different areas. But to me, it's totally seamless because it all has that underlying current of creativity. I realize that, and these are things that I've developed over a lifetime, but all of them are interconnected, and that's one of the things I talk about a lot. As a matter of fact, I was teaching an MBA class last night. And this actual thing about trying to get everybody to connect the dots to all of the different paths in their life. For me, it's fairly simple. It's just, one continuous path of creativity, but it's also what happens in the environment. It's not just about what's happening, from my point of view, but I've been sort of keeping up and flowing with the trends. And I think that's something we're going to talk about later is how do we create those conditions for innovation to happen? Because they just happen in front of you. They're not magic. These things are, created in a certain way. It's been going on through human history. And like, we can go into that if you'd like.
Yeah, but a lot of people have actually, and, I think because I talked to you before about, my path and kind of where I am sort of at a crossroads and trying to figure out what is my next move or what is it that I need to do. But a lot of people feel stuck in a certain way. Like, and I know as human beings, we are very goal oriented, right? Like we have this dream, we have this direction, we have this thing. And funnily enough, in your bio that you put on your own website, you have 3 questions that I think are really, really relevant into this. And which is, how am I going to keep up? How can I get ahead? And how do I make my dreams a reality? And I think that's very powerful because for us, it's something that, you get to a point where, yeah, you have this goal, this big dream, this aspiration. And as you start getting into the trenches and working and realizing you have all these problems and all these, like you said, the environment, and then you realize that you almost lose sight. Like you actually don't know how to move forward, right? Or like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? I have no idea what's happening right now, right? In the present moment. And so that is one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is like, how should we be thinking about innovation and creativity, right? From that kind of standpoint.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a very simple solution here because I talked a bit about three horizons. And that's the one area I wanted to talk about. One horizon one being sort of just an incremental move forward. Horizon three being what the dreamers are looking at, more of what Steve Jobs was talking about when he's talking about how putting a computer in every house. That horizon two part comes because we look at the situation where we still have those dreams and aspirations that you're talking about, but we don't lose sight of finding the little gems along the way that we adapt constantly to. Even though we maintain that high level of this is where our aspirations are, let's not lose sight of the things that are evolving in front of us and then take advantage of them. Still with the same goal, but pick out those things as they happen. I think that's really the key. It's funny. I share this with my students a lot. We look at those things that are happening in front of us, and the real art as a manager, right? So as we develop into management, is finding those little diamonds in the coal mine, like finding those little things. And the more we practice this ability to find the little gems that are happening in front of us, the better you get at it. It's like a muscle that you go to the gym to work out. You can detect and see things that are working and work very, very well, because that's part of it. You still have that lofty goal, but don't throw everything out along the way, because your idea is to sort of sift and find the sort of diamonds, if you will, in the rough.
But what if you don't know? What if you don't know what diamonds look like? What if you, right?
Absolutely. You know what? That's when you have to sort of zoom out to 10,000 feet and take a look at things and scanning the horizon for possibilities. I hate to say, but it's really simple. We look and we observe what's going on, right? We use the art of questioning to go out there and to start building great questions. It's funny, my colleagues and I, we look at, it's not so much the answers we're looking for quite often. It's the really good questions that get asked. That's the inquisitive mind. Going back to Mr. Jobs again, that was his sort of takeaway, was remain curious, look out for those things. So I know sometimes it may not appear to you at the beginning, as far as, there's a diamond in the rough there, but you will get a feeling for what things are moving in the right direction. Once we drill down into it, we'll find out the exact details about it. But something will go off after a while, after you start doing this and practicing, looking for these innovations. You can look and see what other people have done at the beginning to sort of see how their paths went, like you're doing right now, talking to me about my paths. And maybe I'm going to spark something in you that you're going to look for, yourself. You go say, hey, that reminds me of something. And then you'll question it even deeper and discover something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, is it sort of like is it a feeling like when you know that you have something innovative or something that is creative? And maybe we should back up a little and actually describe what creativity and what innovation actually is, because a lot of people, I think, might get confused with that.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I have that wonder now, like as you were talking, is like,
Yeah.
if you don't know what the diamonds look like, what is it that is going to guide you into the path of saying, I think it's something like this. Like, I think this feels right. Like, that's why I was saying, is it a feeling? Is it,
Well, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you, first of all, what's your definition of creativity?
For me, and I take it from, I guess, more of a research approach, because I have read a lot of research on creativity in general. So I usually use that because I think it makes the most sense. And it's creating something that is both novel and useful. That is the definition, the research that I have kind of concluded. The definition of creativity is being able to create something that is, as people regularly call it, outside the box, but actually serves a purpose for something. Like, there was a story that was talking about, like, if you put wings to a tank, right, like a fish tank, that is novel, but it's not useful, right? So people don't think about that as creativity. But if you are able to create something that is useful, and useful is not just necessarily in the physical sense, but also in an emotional sense, if it evokes something in you, if it aspires you to grow, if it makes you want to do something, right, or talk about it or tell a story, that serves a purpose. There's a job to that thing that has been created.
Oh, very good. I'm going to have to listen to more of your podcast. You're starting to sound quite interesting here. You're getting into the deep section. It's interesting because a lot of people in the business world,
Mm-hmm.
when I ask them a question about creativity, they go on about almost an artistic endeavor because they're only seeing with a very closed lens as far as what's possible to be creative. Your definition was much, much better. It was broader, looking at everything having a touch of creativity about them. A novel
Mm-hmm.
way of looking to make something a little bit better and push the envelope a little bit further, right? That's kind of what you have to sort of keep that radar possibility up. And so you do that. I think that was a very good definition. I'm going to give you an A minus on that one.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll I'm
We're going to
close then.
spark it up to an A later. Don't worry.
I know. So is innovation, right? Is it the same thing as creativity?
I interchange them quite a bit because the process used in innovation for me requires creativity or a creative view on that lens. So that's why I always combine the sort of two together. I think they can't be without each other. They're a little bit different in a way, but they have to be combined together. I think you get the most innovation when you have that spark of creativity at the beginning. I also, like for me, I almost look at it in a linear fashion. I use creativity more at the front end, right? And that's a different style of thinking than process, develop, deliver, on the back end of an innovation. So creativity really informs my front end thinking to an innovation. So I always, I talk to a lot of different innovators and on committees and things about it. And I look at the way they're trying to jump right into the develop and delivery side of innovation right away. And I said, but you haven't had any kind of diverse approach to looking at all possibilities, because those interconnections of those possibilities is where the innovation is going to come from. So when people do that, I said, back up. Let's look at the front end. Let's ideate more. Let's clarify. Let's work on that front end a little bit more. And I got to tell you, that's where my thinking style is. So I gravitate towards the front end of the innovation. I'm not the great, I'll admit, I'm not the greatest, implementer along the way. I kind of lose interest at that part of the innovation. Once the idea is born, I don't, send it to college. I don't finish it off. So
I can relate very much. I'm exactly that way. I'm someone that I can have all the ideas. Like I have an idea notebook, and every time I have something and something sparks or whatever, I write it down, and whatever I can create a lot of different ideas from it. But I tell other people, I was like, oh my God, that's a really great idea. Have you tried doing it? Nope, because I have like a million others that I have to and actually starting that idea is more of a chore than just coming up with the idea. Like I love coming up with how do we make this better, but not. But once you actually start rolling that process, is
Well, I'll do a quick little examination of you right now to see if I was to look at your thinking profile, and I'm going to refer to, there's a group called Foursight out of Buffalo, out of the university there, sunny New York. And what they do is they've been studying creative thinking for 60 years. And so what they're saying is there's basically only 4 steps, right, to creative thinking, right? We sort of look at the beginning. We look at your ways to clarify. You want to find out more information first. Then we ideate about new ideas. This is where your strength is. I could see it right away. And then we have that whole phase of develop and then implementation. So your preference would be in the ideate. That's what turns you on, gets you thinking, gets your energy up. So you need to have, hopefully you married have a partner that's, good at developing and implementing to complement you.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be putting that into dating apps, in order for people to have the right partners in life.
Exactly. I'm a discoverer.
Exactly. That's kind of your little badge, I am a discoverer, you admit it, right? But I'm not a great implementer, so I've got to find one of those. It's funny, I talk to a lot of people in the world of HR and about creativity. I talk to a lot of people and I said, how come you design teams by, we look at the resume and we look at what they've done. And yet when we look at their thinking styles, they have very similar thinking styles. I said, how are we going to come up with innovation if everybody has the same thinking style and no complementary and understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses? It's funny. A lot of teams I go in and I referee that they're having difficulty because they have very similar thinking styles. And so there's a clash there quite often because they're arguing at that same point. We can't get past it. I keep telling them we need to have balancing within the teams. And HR people are starting to sort of catch on to this, but it's absolutely true. We need to have that balance going on of discovery, of discovering things, but also delivery is very important. And I think I told you the story about Starbucks and how Howard Schultz, yeah, I can't remember his first name. I remember Mr. Schultz. How he saved Starbucks because at the beginning it was very novel and we had lots of people on the front end. But as the company grew and they got into more supply chain issues and implementation issues, they had to, increase that in the company. But that sort of took over, and they lost that spark of looking for that new innovation or idea, and that nearly collapsed the company. He had to come back in and help the management retool the company again. It's that big a problem. So having balance is a big, big thing.
So that's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people, a lot of businesses, nonprofits, all these kinds of things go by their day. And when you are, let's say, a small business, because that's the predominant majority of businesses in Canada. But when you're a small business, you usually tend to have a smaller team, right? Or you're a solo person, or you have a partner or something like that, right? There's not that many people, and nobody actually comes to think about. Nobody brings that idea of how do we balance teams. Everybody's always like, okay, we have the service or we have this thing that we are going to promote. How are we going to do it? Right. Let's throw social media on the table, or let's throw, that kind of thing. And then we kind of go and try it without giving it much thought as to what is the best way. How do you do it? Like, you're right. Like, you're kind of putting those pieces of, like, have you ever thought about actually what is the right question that you should be answering, instead of trying to be everywhere all at once, or doing all these kinds of asking just the question, hey, who's going to solve it, right? But how do we solve it, and how do we bring the right team together to actually solve it? I think that's a very interesting way of looking at things.
Oh, absolutely. You also have to understand yourself, right? You have to understand where you sort of fit on the spectrum, right? As far as what your strength and your things that you like to do. But understanding your weaknesses is a great thing for an entrepreneur. You know where you need help. You know where you don't shine the most, or where you have the most friction. And that way you've got to find either external, people to help you with that, consultants, or something to come in if you're a solopreneur, right? You have to find that ability, because how many great inventors do you know become CEOs of their same companies? It's totally different skill sets and thinking styles. The innovator or the inventor persona, right, that goes out there and can create something, doesn't necessarily make the best implementer. I mean, we've said again and again, companies doing very, very well, and then you realize that the guy at the top that created the product or service, or engineer that created the device, is not the best guy to sell this thing. He's going to need help. He's going to need a great team. Even if it's like single, we have to reach out to those little, players that come in off waivers or whatever in our team. We have to be able to do that. We have to be able to draw on that capability. Understand that's not, something that we enjoy or not really great at, and bring those people in to help us, because that function has to be done. And you've got to find a way to do it, whether it's with yourself, it's going to be uncomfortable, or you actually have somebody help you out with that or get some advice. It doesn't have to be a big relationship. Could be something fairly casual, but you understand what you're dealing with, why this product is not working. We do this quite often. For instance, as consultants, we go in and figure out, what's going wrong in a company. And most of the time, I've got to be honest with you, it's because of the imbalancing. And it's something we sort of haven't really, we're starting to mature, get there, but we're not quite there yet.
But that's what's really interesting, is that a lot of people that I end up being a consultant for, they always come in and they're like, okay, we need help with X, right? Like this is the problem. And oftentimes I have to go in and be like, okay, is that actually the problem? Do you actually need that, or is it something else? Is it like a disease from from something else? Does it come from somewhere else, right? And a lot of people have really hard, going back to that idea of not knowing what a diamond looks like. A lot of people have really hard way of not knowing what is wrong. They can feel that something is wrong or something doesn't quite work, but they have no idea what it is. So they blame it on, most often, from my perspective, they blame it on the delivery. Like, social media isn't working, marketing doesn't work, or, creating this service didn't work. And for me, I always talk a lot about telling people it's more about making what you believe in work, right? If you believe in social media, if you believe in Google Ads, if you believe in this kind of things, how do you learn and how do you adapt to make it work, as opposed to just throwing it out there? And if it doesn't work, it's that problem, right? So how do you solve the right problem? How do you, as an entrepreneur, as someone that has never understood creativity or innovation from that point of view, how would you suggest someone to actually try and solve the right problem?
Well, again, I'm going to quote Mr. Einstein on this one, right? Because he was a smart guy back in the day. I'm sure he'd be considered smart now, but he was absolutely true when he says, you've got to, if I had an hour to solve the problems of the world, I'd spend, 55 minutes on the problem. I think where we don't get to, and this is the maturity level, because I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. They don't solve the right problem. So they don't spend enough time. Everybody wants to race to the solution or the development. Always. It's just, they keep thinking it's a waste of time. We've gone over this problem. We've gone over it again and again and again. But that solid foundation will make everything work in your organization. Like, so, you could go for years trying to work on a problem that's not really a great problem that that you have a really good grasp on. So what I'm saying at the beginning is, so these companies that ask your advice, I would step them right back to the beginning and say, okay, well, let's look at your whole problem structure here. What's your problem statement? Let's see if you've actually identified something correctly. Are you looking at the horizon correctly in order to get that? I know it seems like a lot of work at the front end, but it pays off in spades at the end, because you've got a really good understanding. So that's kind of where I'd go with it. I'd say, okay, let's step back. Let's go right from the beginning again. Let's just examine the problem that you have. Let's look at the environment. Let's look at the problem you're sort of dealing with. Do you have a world-class handle on that problem? I would guess 90% of the time, they don't. They don't really have a great understanding of not just the problem, but the perspective of the problem and trying to come up with a solution. We also have to look at, and this is the interesting thing later on, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, that has changed the game so often, even in small things, because it gives us a lot more access quickly to information that we didn't have before. We'd have to go and observe and try and do all these things. AI helps with that so great, as far as getting more information into our hands and into our heads, right?
And it's something that's really interesting. And like I do have a lot of questions about AI for you, because you are also part of that system, I think, at your university, that you're trying to meld artificial intelligence with the educational system to help people, I guess, learn better. And correct me if I'm wrong with that. But
everything, not just learn better, but how the administration, how the business model of education runs. We have such a big problem with that. It's a very complex problem. Mm-hmm. So artificial intelligence is weaved into the student experience, the financial side of it. It's all dovetailed together on every aspect of how the university business runs. Right. So it's not just making it better for the students. They're only one character in this 4 or 5 character play.
Interesting.
You've got to make the business run. And I am going to, keep telling you that to you, that university and education's a business is like any other, right? Absolutely. So we have customers, but we have multiple customers, not just the students, but there's the whole, funding apparatus, and then what the corporate people want to get out of it. And there's a lot of extra players in the marketplace, the government included, right?
So what about, and I guess it's something that I didn't connect the dots before, but I'm doing it now as you have kind of talked about. There's something that you talked about in your website, which is called the wisdom of the crowd, and how important it is to have a crowd, basically, to inspire new solutions. And we kind of talked about it a little bit. And how does AI fit into that then, from that perspective, from an overall perspective? Because does that mean that we don't need a crowd now because of AI, or how does that fit into this concept from your perspective?
Yeah. For me, so what I was talking about when I'm talking about the crowd is it's amazing when we have diverse points of view join with us on this quest and open our, not just we're presenting a view, but we're receiving a lot. I think I talked about, I spent some time in Cambridge, and what we did there is that a lot of people, I always thought I was going to go to Boston and I was going to gain all this knowledge from everybody there. But what was interesting, as soon as I started to have conversations and talk to people, they listened intently. Some of the best minds in the world, I was going there to learn from them, and they were pestering me with lots of questions and information. And I realized that was the key, was asking those sort of questions along the way. So that was sort of part of it. Okay. It was is asking or listening to responses all around you. That's a big deal. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's about asking a lot of questions in order to understand the problem, in order to, get insights from other people. And even through AI, it's about asking a lot of questions, right? Because I believe AI is almost like an average conglomeration of the entire world, because that's basically, taking data from the entire world and putting it together. So it spits out, I call it average world views, if you were to say it that. But in order for you to create and innovate and stuff like that, you need things that aren't average. You need things that aren't, already existing sort of in that idea, to be able to connect the dots. Can AI help you do that? Or is that a human thing that still needs to happen?
It's still a human thing. I got to tell you, some of the best innovative ideas that I've ever come up with. I used to also mentor kids like between the ages of, say, like teaching the same concepts, ages of 5 to say 13. We could consult with, school age kids. And it's amazing when I'm treating them as an equal, listening to them, and sometimes they're inquisitive. They would ask a question I would never, ever think of. So I can't build a prompt to an AI of something that I'm going to my brain just doesn't think like that. And this, this 8-year-old kid would come out with something. It may not be the refined question, but they're exploring an area that my brain has never got to before. That's not available in AI, right? That's not something that it's going to be from total left field. It needs direction. It needs prompts. It needs things from you. So it's your influence, your thoughts in that pattern. But getting an influence outside of what your thought patterns usually are, and you then realize, getting some thought about it, that's when usually the light bulb goes on, because they may have asked the question wrong and then got half of it, incorrect, but they sparked, there was a little something in what they said, tweaked an association in my brain with something else. And then it's like, when chocolate hits peanut butter, we come up with something really, really cool, right? Because I never thought about doing those things, but I never even considered it before. So that influenced me. So forgive me, I'm just going to go back in history here a little bit. One of the things that I think is so powerful, and we're hopefully get a chance to sort of explore a bit more today, is creating the condition for innovation to happen. Now, it's happened a lot in human history, but there's 2 examples I wanted to talk about real quick. One was the Renaissance period. And part of that period, why did it become so much, further advancements in engineering and in art and architecture? It was a real flourishing in human history. When we look at it, and lots of influences that happened, some of it was financial, but it was, you brought together lots of artists and people sharing concepts and ideas that they hadn't even thought of before. And that mixing of ideas was so important, because it influenced, like Da Vinci and Michelangelo, those guys. Imagine that back in the day, sitting and want to have a coffee, maybe a glass of wine with Da Vinci. And he would ask you a bunch of questions, and it would influence his work. And then he'd go over and see some sculptures that were warehoused, because there was warehousing back then of all the artists, right? And they would influence each other. And so those clear influences, right, and openness to try something new led to these great leaps of innovation. That's one thing I don't think we have as much anymore. The getting together and sharing ideas. We kind of do it with some of these events, but it's not a regular practice. It's the idea and influence each other. That's where we're going to get the real sparks in that of innovation. So it's really about creating those conditions for innovation to happen. We don't have enough of that. We need to do that. I'm putting the challenge up to you to pull these people together, some great minds.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great way of putting it, because you're absolutely right. In a world that is very much a world of convenience, if you will. When you're talking about conditions, I immediately started thinking about the environment, putting yourself in the right environment so that creativity and innovation can flourish. And in a world that is so based on convenience, and that's where AI kind of comes in, where AI is it's making things easier, right? It's not making it better, it's not making it more innovative or anything like that. It's just making it easier. So in a world of convenience, it's really hard, or it's getting harder and harder to actually find those places where you can just sit and expand your mind, because it's easier to just sit on the couch and watch TV. It's easier to instead of sit down with a pen and a paper and actually think about the problem, and actually go have coffee with someone and reach out and ask them questions like, tell me about your life, or tell me about how things work. Like it takes that extra effort that I think people don't normally realize, but it's such an important set, like you said, to be able to create that environment to fit in creativity, right?
Yeah, I also make sure that when I talk to somebody about things like that, it's not, don't come, I mean, I'd like him to come see me I'm doing, a lecture or a presentation, but it's not about me giving you all of the insight to do what I did in order to do this. All I'm trying to do is spark the innovation gene in you to take at least something that what I've said and then relate it to something in your own life or personal experience, and then you own it. And so that's okay. I've just given a little influence to you, but it really has to come from within inside you. So I'm not about, don't sort of follow me in a way. Don't follow me, but I'm going to inspire you to just expand your thinking and possibilities, because take what I've done and remix it to something else, and remix that to something else, and go further, further, further. Right. So I'm just there to sort of light the fire. You're the one that you have to blow on the flames a little bit, but you're going to make it happen yourself. I was going to say the other second period, forgive me, back to my history thing here.
Yeah.
The second real period that was really clear was the Enlightenment period. And if you look at works of Stephen Berlin Johnson, he goes back and, again, these great advances in literary history and things that were going on were because of the coffee shop getting together and exchanging ideas, influencing each other, not just copying each other, but influencing. I think this would really help, say, for instance, with the Aurelia market or Aurelia area, when you look at, you have some really unique opportunities, challenges too, but opportunities in the area, but you've got to make it your own. So you take what's possible, you look what other people have done, but then say, how does it apply to me? How can I leverage that to make something a little bit better, a little bit different? Let me make the bar a little higher. Not copy, but let me be influenced by it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is very important. A question kind of popped into my mind as you were saying, is like, does everybody have the capacity to be creative or innovative? I know that's something that I have people ask me, is like, I don't know if I'm a creative person, or I don't consider myself creative. Does everybody have the capacity? Is there a gene or something?
Absolutely. Well, so there was some research done in this area, so I'll just quote it a little bit. We looked at close to 700 identical twins, and they said, is creativity genetic? Right? Because they said, do I have it, am I born with it? And they actually found out that 33% of the traits that we call, that lead to creativity are genetic. So there is a part of that that's true. But that also tells me that 2/3 or 66% of what people are considered creative is a learned skill. So I could take anybody, and actually this happens all the time for me, I'm not creative. That's like, once they understand where their strengths are, then they realize, I can take a look at that ideation and that clarifying world and that discovery world and understand it. Maybe I don't have as much influence in the discovery gene in myself, but if I recognize it and have somebody on my team that can help with that, we can get over that initial spark. And then I can take and be really good at what I do at delivering it. So again, it's back to that sort of team methodology, right?
Yeah.
You need to find your other half or your other parts of your team that are going to work and gel together. Don't ever be the same. You get groupthink happening and you never really get anything great and innovative from it. But you need to find that person that works with you, right? That's what happens.
And I think a lot of people also think that delivering on a product, like actually doing the work, is not considered creative. Like the creativity comes from, I have the idea, or I am revolutionizing the industry or whatever, not just like, I can actually take this idea and make it into a workable concept, into a prototype, into something. I feel like there is a lot of value that needs to be given to the idea that actually working on something, and it's also part of creativity, because as you start doing it, you realize that there is problems, that there's hiccups, or like this isn't the right material, or this, and whatever, and you have to solve that as well. That involves I think the same levels of creativity, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that absolutely happens. We get in that there is creative components of it. When we get to the delivery side of actually implementing something,
Mm-hmm.
quite often you have to be incredibly creative, because there's a reason this product and the service or thing's not working is because of the approach on delivery. So you've got to, open your mind to other possibilities of saying, let's reframe this of how this is going to affect somebody else. And it may be very complex. It's not a simple thing of, well, we've got X, Y, amount of product and we've got to deliver it and sell it at Walmart. It doesn't work like that. Quite often you have to be incredibly creative on how you're going to sell this. And especially you're a marketeer, right? So marketer, you go out there and that you're living and breathing, people's wants and desires all the time, but you have to be agile that if something doesn't work, cause you put a prototype out there, if it doesn't work right away, you look at, hey, you don't say, I have a problem. Okay. This is an opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Let's learn from that, but we got to get out of it quickly. Don't keep flogging it for 2 years when you know it's not going to work. Right. It's not, it's one of the things I have a little bit of problem with some of the entrepreneurial, courses and things that are out there saying, you just keep plugging away no matter what. It's really that fortitude and that grit that's going to get you through. But if it's a
Right.
bad idea, it's a bad idea. And if it's the wrong time, it's the wrong time. So you know what? You may have to start all over again, but you go back to those initial principles. You say, okay, am I serving a human need? We also got into a period in time where we talked a lot about design thinking. I taught design thinking for a long, long time because it's human centered. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem I found with it was so one dimensional, really, that I not only had to take in consideration the consumers. This is where the implementer's strength is, by the way, is not only understanding the consumer, but also the manufacturing to make it, the logistics of shipping the product, selling the product. All those things have to be factored in. This is where your great implementer creativity comes in to factor all that. It's not just the original spark. This is a great mouse that you created. It's how do we sell this thing? How do we market this thing? Is it the right time? There's so many complex questions. So you're right. I absolutely agree with you that creativity from the implementer's point of view, you absolutely need that too.
That's fantastic. And I was, I guess, one of the questions that I was going to ask, is, or maybe I already asked it, but what are the steps solving a problem? Because you were talking about it from, I remember you talking about it in someone else's, it was like a YouTube video or something like that, talking about how you actually, um, deal with your classes, or explain things in your classes, where it's about figuring out the problem. And I'm trying to find it here. I don't, I wrote it somewhere. I swear to God, I wrote it somewhere, but it was something along the lines of, you are questioning, and then you go into observing, and then networking, and then experimentation, and then you just kind of flip back into that. Right. I don't know if you can expand, because that I feel like is sort of what you're asking, or
Sure.
what you're talking about.
Yeah. So just to clarify, one of the major tools I was going to talk about, this is from the Innovator's DNA,
Right.
right? That whole series and concept. They have a test that you can take. And basically it puts you on a scale of whether you're a discoverer or deliverer or a developer in the center. So that's sort of where that comes from. The methodology is quite simple and it's very, very basic. For every entrepreneur, I would recommend this, by the way, is understanding the key number one thing is questioning. This is where we go through and we start to continually refine, clarify, question to make sure that we are, again, solving the right problem, right? The big thing that I love, I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, right? So I'm all about observation, right? The whole idea of observing something and seeing all of the nuances of things that are going with it. That other skill, so you've got questioning, observation, very, very big. on the innovation scale. You absolutely have to continually I was going to say, as far as the innovator superpowers, those are really the top two, right? Questioning and observation. If you can get better at those two things, it'll just make you a better entrepreneur or a great CEO, like some of the top CEOs in the world. As a matter of fact, this is where the group of the Innovators DNA got the research done. It was done through Harvard and MIT and Brigham Young, where they looked at the top CEOs in the world. At the time, it was Bezos, and they had some jobs in there, and they had a few other people in there. But they had these traits that made them so good. And the number one trait of all of them was questioning, and the second was observation. So they looked at those skills, and they continually refine them every single time or expertise. Those are the two go-to things in order to find things out. Once we sort of get an idea there, the experimentation part, this is where the whole theory about trying to fail fast so that we can learn from it. That's through the experimentation and learning from what it doesn't go right. Sometimes it's better if it doesn't go right early, because then you learn so much more. Like, you have speculation in your head when you go out, when you think that this iPhone will work and will do something. But when you start experimenting with it and trying it out, you know what? The glass keeps breaking. So we got to create Gorilla Glass, right? Or we got to do something else with it. That comes from testing and trying it out through experimentation. As a matter of fact, that's going to be on next week's lecture on my MBA. And I do a cool little exercise. I go to the dollar store, right? And I have a $50 limit, and I go just get parts and things from the dollar store, balloons and paper clips and all this. And this is a master's class. So these are adults. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, I want you to channel your inner child for this exercise. For the next hour, you're going to build from scratch, from paper clips and whatever, an object that's going to tell a story about your product or your idea. It's part of the experimentation process to see if you can communicate it, right? So it's interesting. That sort of flows into that part of it. The networking is where you can connect it to other things. Years ago, I worked on some projects at MIT with we had one of our guests, and was Dean Kamen. He was the inventor of the Segway. And he had lots to admit about the Segway, what went right and what went wrong. But it's funny because he's a brilliant engineer, brilliant man. And he said, we kind of developed this, but we didn't really figure out what we could actually do with it. Because for instance, with a Segway, it's a motorized vehicle. So you can't drive it on the sidewalk and you can't drive it on the road. So where were we going to run this thing? After all that, they didn't do some of the initial questions. But anyway, so one of the great, I digress. Anyway, Dean, he has a DECA research. And so they have an engineering company that makes helicopters, and they make medical devices and all kinds of stuff. And so what he does quite often is he borrows some technology from one division, say the helicopter division on hydraulics, and puts it into the medical division to help solve a problem. So what he's doing is networking the problem. He'll put the problem out there to his engineers, and they may not have the knowledge, but somebody else will, and then they will graft that in. So it's basically borrowing and transferring ideas and knowledge from other industries or other areas. I did a lecture last week on biomimicry. Okay, biomimicry is the study of nature for getting influences to innovation. So simple things like the story about Velcro, right? Where Velcro came from was a person was out walking their dog, and they had to pull the burrs off the dog because they ran through the field, and they realized that this is something that would stick and put back together, put back together. But it just came through a simple observation, networking a few things together, experimenting a little bit. But those four elements in combination, observation, questioning, observation, networking, and experimentation, put those together, you got a really good formula for coming up with an innovation.
Wow. Yeah. And that's fantastic. Like, you're totally speaking my language. I'm trying to not, dive into each and every little thing, because we would stay here forever. But I love the concept of experimenting, especially because I am very much that. I'm a person that if I can implement anything, I do it for the sake of experimentation. I do it for the sake of knowing whether, it's possible, whether it's right, whether it actually works or not, right? But a lot of people are very resistant to change. Like, it's almost like a natural phenomenon. A lot of people just like I don't like to experiment. I don't want it because I'm afraid that I'm going to fail. And if I fail, then I'm going to feel bad. And we are hardwired to not want to feel bad. So how do you envision from that idea of innovation perspective, right, to help people step out of that comfort zone and break from their current habits, if you will, to be able to create and innovate?
Yeah. First of all, I also set up boundaries when I do a session or I do a class. I do psychological safety, right? So the idea is that what you say, what you can experiment with, I want you to be as totally diverse as possible. So I'm not going to sit there and criticize you for trying something that's so unique, so far out there. I said, for every crazy, wild idea, there's a grain of truth in there that I can associate and build to something else. So I put the challenge out there. I've been teaching in master's programs for about 15 years now, and no one's ever beaten me yet where they've out-crazied me, in the idea. Because I said, you got to let yourself think really far, not just outside the box, but almost outside the universe of the box. You have to go so far out there because there's something that's, that drove you to that. And if I drill down enough, I'm going to find out that, there's the interesting thing about what you were experimenting with. It may not be the be all end all, but there's an element in there, the way the box lid opened up or something that, what, I'm going to file that because that's something that I can use. So the benefits of experimentation are not just whether building a prototype, whether it works or not. It's almost cathartic in a way. It's like, I'm going to try to communicate this idea. I'm going to do my best. But in what you see in my presentation, there may be something here that you think, what, I could use that and something I'm doing. I mean, I think, again, I don't want to keep mentioning Steve Jobs, but when he went to Xerox PARC and he looked around and he saw there was this cool little thing that had a wire on it, but it was like you didn't have to type everything. You could just use this thing. And like, we're going to work it. That's a great idea. So he observed, did the same sort of thing where he saw the diamonds. Like that was one of his gifts. He could see those diamonds in that coal mine. He could say, this mouse, it could really take off. I could see this where we're going to get away from, the human interaction part of it with just a keyboard. That's no good. Let's try that. But that was just inspiration by seeing that from somebody else, right? So that through experimentation and through observation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And from that concept, I think just stepping back a little bit, it's just how do I know, right, if I'm going in the right direction? Like I started creating something, I started solving a problem, I started observing, and I'm starting to experiment, right? But I keep failing because, again, it happens, right? Yep. You're going to fail more often than you're going to win, if you will.
Yep.
How do I know if it's just doomed to fail and I just need to scrap it, leave it, like this is not a good idea? Or if it's a really good idea, I'm not in the right direction yet, or like, I'm not getting somewhere. How would you?
I'm going to have to ask you, how many of those partial projects do you have on the shelf right now?
Honestly, I have quite a few.
I know. Well, this is what I'm getting at. So it's one of the things where if you're trying something, sometimes it may not, there's three main factors that happen, right? And the acronym for it is SET, set, right? It's either socially ready or economically viable or the technology is ready. And so we have vectors where the technology increases and reaches a certain spot. Economically, we look at, the 99 cents per song really changed how Napster's situation happened with, Apple Music and so forth, right? And economically, that 99 cents really worked. Socially, everybody kind of liked the idea of downloading music, but they really wanted to make it legal. So they needed to figure out a way to do it. That was a stroke of brilliance. But then what he saw at the time, you know who I'm talking about, Mr. SJ. I won't say his name again, right? What he saw was the convergence of those three vectors. So what you have to ask yourself, getting back to your question, what you have to see is, do you ever see where this will reach a convergence point with all those three things making sense at the same time? When will that point be? If you don't think they'll ever cross, to make it viable, right, to make it socially, that you want this for humanity to serve people, and, if those three vectors don't cross on the technology side, then you're never going to get there. So I'll tell you why, because I'm working with a lot of startups right now, and the technology's not quite there. And I said, but that's okay. You can project out a couple of years. If you pick something like with off the shelf technology right now, it's almost not worth doing because it's already been there. You've already done that. There's not that much new that's going to happen with it. You've got to sort of aim a little bit further ahead. It's kind of like the Wayne Gretzky analogy where he took a piece of paper and he would always follow a game where he thought the puck was going to go. Thank you, Walter Gretzky, for teaching Wayne that. Right? It changed hockey history. But it's where the puck is going to go, not where the puck is. So again, when you're trying to mature your product out there, you want to know whether I should still be banging my head. Does it make sense? What will be the time frame for these convergence of these three things? Social, economic, and technology. When will they all be right at the right time? That's kind of, if it's 5 years and you can't hang in there for 5 years, put it on the shelf, right? Well, how long was the internet on the shelf? I mean, come on. It took about 10 years for him to actually make this possible. He had the idea, right? And my father was an inventor a long, long time ago. And he had the same sort of thing. He had some fabulous ideas, but they were too far out in timeline in order to be possible, right? So that was a difficulty. You have to figure that out, where you think this will be emergent. If you can predict that, that's the golden goose, where all three of them combine to work for you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That it takes me back to sort of what you were saying about that H3, about being able to think and being crazy, and like in that concept. Because when I did it in the presentation that we first when we met each other, it's something that really sparked in that I never realized that I hadn't gone as far, right? But you really nailed, like you really asked, like just go nuts, go crazy, right? And that, when I was given permission to do that, then all of a sudden I was like, okay, then let's do it. Because usually I'm used to working within those constraints of what's real or what's possible or what's like, within this community or within whatever, right? But to actually be able to think further out, like you said, right? And just allow yourself to expand, you give yourself a lot of room to play with, right? I think a lot of people get very constrained when it comes to their own creativity, and I include myself in that, where I have a ceiling and I have a bottom, right? And that forces me to only be creative within these specific parameters. But what if you like opened the box and allowed yourself to just roam free like a kid, right? Without any knowledge or anything that's limiting your viewpoint, to just be able to expand. And I think that would help a lot of people see it as like, don't constrain yourself into, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough contacts, or I don't have enough whatever, right? Just start by exploring, start by being crazy, right? And just kind of,
for lack of a better term, being crazy. I like that. But you know what? I got to just forgive me. I'm just going to add on. I'm going to scaffold onto your idea here. Because one of the other things I've been spending a lot of time in the world is adaptability right now, and measuring somebody's AQ, right? And their adaptability quotient is their ability to change, to rapid change, and why that's become so necessary. And I think I may have mentioned it in the session we were in, but when we looked at companies up into the early 1980s, the average sort of life of a major company was 60 years. So in the 30 years for build and, then the decline. Well, that has become, when the 80s, 90s, and so forth, that was about 50, it went down to about 15 years for the average life cycle of a company. What we're predicting right now, if you took a survey they were probably at 3 or 4 years, is the average life cycle of a company.
Wow.
So you can imagine, if you're not reinventing yourself after 2 years, right now, you're going to be falling off the map. So how ready do you have to have the ability to change? And I've heard this many, many times. So I'm just going to quote somebody else here. The amount of change that's happened in the last 10 years, in the next 10 years, will be the equivalent of 100 years of change that we've just been through. So if you look back 100 years ago to the 1920s, what was the sort of state of the technology and what was sort of going on? Imagine that from that to now, we're going to have that same amount of change in the next 10 years. So it's going to be, it is revolutionary. So this is part of it's, AI and technology and so forth, but just the way we're rapidly advancing. So if you're not already in the mindset of continual learning, continual observation, continual questioning, you are never, ever going to keep up or invent for the next time, right? For the next thing that's going to happen or for the reinvention you're going to have. You have to kind of build this now into your sort of day-to-day activities, is the ability to observe, network, question. You have to build that into sort of your DNA, that's what you're going to be doing all the time now. I know it sounds very tiring, but that's just the reality of how fast things are going. You've got to build that in.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it very clearly. A lot of people talk about it with technology in particular, how every year, every 2 years, a new phone comes in, a new computer comes in, a new whatever, you look at AI, look at how many advances it's happening so quickly, how much better ChatGPT is, as an example, than it was just a year ago, right? But you don't think about it from just a business point of view. But you're right, the ability to generate ideas, if you can generate ideas fast enough, because the pace of the world is going so fast, right? It's going to be very hard for you to keep up, basically, with the people that can actually have that adaptive mind that can actually bend and think and create, I guess, more at will, if you will.
Yeah, well, it has to be natural, like to you. Like you can't be thinking about it. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to file that here. I'm going to see how I can associate. You automatically start linking things together. That's where possibilities come from. If you look at patterns too deeply of the past, right, you're going to be mired. Like, those rules don't exist anymore. I mean, I'll just give you a quick example. I used to teach, I was a television broadcast professor as well a while ago. And we were teaching students how to operate cameras and go into a studio and be a camera operator. And then I asked the question, I said, well, how many studios, say in Toronto, or the basic area where all the main networks are, how many actually have camera operators anymore? It's totally robotic. It's almost none. So we're training hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students on careers that no longer exist. I mean, that's one observation. Like, you've got to be able to change quickly if there's no, positions anymore, if there's no need for that. You really need a different skill set. So got to rapidly change. And that's problem we're going to find in a lot of our educational systems, not to blame them on all that, but just being able to keep up to what it will be possible. I think the best skill that we can ever train anybody in is adaptability, to be able to understand what to look for, how to sort of catalog something we see, and how to leverage it, take advantage of it. That adaptability skill is going to be critical. It should be like a core course. When you get your degree or whatever the new kind of degree will be, you'll end up being able to adapt and change. Because think about it, if I just said to you, the business life cycle is, say, 3 years, say you had a 4-year degree program, by the time you started your degree, by the time you finished, what has changed?
Different
everything, right? The amount of change hasn't changed. Your ability to navigate change is something you should have, but the actual technical skill, it's almost, I won't say irrelevant, but it's just almost like a historical look at what we used to do. Now do something different.
I actually remember that very clearly when I was in university, when that used to be on multiple professors, multiple degrees, basically saying that, whatever you learn now, it's going to be obsolete when you actually start doing it. So this is more of a review of how it used to work, because when you get out, like, things will work differently, not only because it's more practical, obviously, but it's just, the tools that we know now, that we have enough information to teach now, are not the tools that are going to be available, when you get out, because technology moves that fast.
So what I'm going to ask you, what would you think is one of the top future-proof skills to learn as a human being? This is important to your future. I want to know it.
Yeah. In order to future-proof, I mean, obviously you've talked about it, and I actually have a quote here from Natalie Fratto, which is the VP of Goldman Sachs.
Sachs. Yeah.
But she was talking about how IQ, right, is the minimum you need to get a job, but AQ is how you will be successful over time. Correct. And I do agree with that. It's something that I didn't know existed, that adaptability quotient, right? But the more I started doing research into it, the more I realized, okay, so I think this is actually it. Like, the idea of being able to have that ability to say, okay, I got stuck in a problem. Let's go around the problem, right? I forget, I think it was Simon Sinek that was presenting and talking about how when there's a chair in front of you, what do? A lot of people just give up and be like, well, the chair's in the way. I can't move forward, right? But people that have that adaptable mindset would be like, okay, so I can go on around the side, I can go on top of it, I can move the chair, I can do that kind of thing. But having the ability to be able to think that way is, I call it critical thinking. I don't know if it's actually critical thinking.
The same thing, yeah. Overall,
yeah. So I kind of think about it from that thing, is that I feel like a lot of people are not being taught, or have never been taught, how to critical think, right? So it's one of those things that how are you going to think, right, later on if you have no idea how to do it?
See, and my thinking is, why do we wait to university or master's level to start talking about that? That should be something at the public school level, like developing your critical thinking skills. It doesn't have to be super high in order. The principles are very simple. So to be able to sort of get the process started in adaptability when you're younger, so that you're saying, I'm trained to be, just a lawyer or whatever. So when the world changes rapidly, you have the ability to sort of mold and blossom into the main principles. You want a job that's, either it's rewarding or something like that. The H3 is still there in your life. But, the H2 is going to change based on what's going on and what's in front of you. And how do you approach that change? Do you fear that change? Or do you look at that as an opportunity? Or do you sort of navigate in, or do you just collapse and fail? I mean, that's a reality for a lot of people. When they come up against adversity, say, for instance, we have, students going through university and they fail a couple of tests, and you realize that they need counseling because they're so distraught that their plans for their life have changed. Well, no kidding. How many careers do you think you're going to have? I mean, it's one of those things where you are going to change and get used to change, rapid change happening in your life. You've got to be able to learn how to deal with that, right?
Yeah,
and how to roll
absolutely.
that, especially if you're an entrepreneur, because, you've got a fabulous idea and a passion maybe, but you've got to have it in perspective. Does it meet all the tests? Are you serving a need? Will there be a future for this particular innovation? Does it work in the area that you're going to work in? How are you going to, do this? Have you hired the right marketing company like your company to help them out?
Absolutely. So can you expand a little bit more on AQ? Because I think a lot of people know what IQ is, right? Yep. There's tests, there's all these kind of things. And everybody has been kind of started talking about EQ, which is the emotional quotient, right? To be more empathetic and right. But what is AQ? And you've already touched on it, but can you expand on it a little bit more to kind of give that perspective to people that have never heard of it?
Sure. And again, you did it right thing. You basically said, IQ was our first take at this, and EQ came along and became really great. But it also gave us that whole empathy gene, right? That's what we kind of needed. That very critical. But what AQ is, it's really your adaptability to change and to unlearn. I know it's a strange thing to say, but unlearning is quite important. And a lot of my colleagues in Cambridge will have written many, many books on this. The ability that if you say you learn something and then all of a sudden a technology like AI comes in there, how do you unlearn all of those things that you set up as your base principles in order to adapt to the new thing that's happening? That transition and forgetting what you already know and grasping onto new knowledge, that is absolutely huge. So just in a quick nutshell, AQ, Adaptability Quotient, is a measurement of your ability to adapt. It comes generally in 3 areas. You measure your abilities, you measure your character, and then you measure the environment. And each one of those 3 areas has a subsection of 5 areas that I won't go into too many details because it's a little bit too long to sort of go through. Well, what it measures is your inherent capability, your likes, your preferences, for instance, under the A side of it, for the ACE for short. C, understands your character and your ethics and how you approach things. So we kind of measure how you approach things and how that will vary throughout the projects. Environment is where you work and how you work. And even if you're an entrepreneur, the conditions you work in. Because sometimes you can have fantastic ability and you can have great character, but the environment that you've set yourself up won't allow you to achieve what you want. As far as whether it's with a company, the way you're pitching it, or maybe you're a solopreneur and the environment that you're working in is not conducive to give you what you need in order to move forward. So the idea is we have to be able to, again, it's creating those conditions for innovation to happen, but also creating those conditions for us to be able to be adaptive. If you're locked into a place where you get, if you don't make these sales quotas by the end of the quarter, you're gone. And they don't give you the ability to do that, you have no hope. You're just no way. So the environment is a huge portion of this. It's, sometimes you can't change these things, but you have to understand what is holding you back, right? I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, that's one of the key ones beyond ability, because everybody's, they've already got the spirit and they've got a great character, but the environment that they've set themselves up in. Anyway, what AQ is a numeric measurement. It's a psychometric test, for instance, that you can be grafted. It does two things. It not only helps you, it's not like your whole goal is to score the highest of all of these categories. It's really to put you in perspective of what your preferences are like, but also the team around you. Because quite often, if you, take one of these psychometric tests and you realize that your team's doing very well, but there's a couple of performers on your team that you're working with that are doing negative things with your innovation and not allowing you to get forward, it's going to hold you back totally. So you've got to be able to understand environment. You got to be able to understand character and ability. And so we have these rankings that are there as a psychometric test to show you where you are, where your rest of your team is, and how you can blend together to work towards smoothing some of these things out. If you have low unlearned capability, you've got a company that's been doing the same thing for so many years, and you want to work on an innovative product, you've got to unlearn those basic skills and relearn and retool new skills. So that's it. So AQ is just a numeric value that we've given to ranking these 15 categories about your ability to change and adapt to new situations. Now, it's funny. People think, we've been talking about it for the last maybe 20 years, and all through our time here. But really, AQ has been around since the beginning of time. And I talk about this like primitive man, humanity, men, women, right? Primitive times, they had to adapt in order to survive. Absolutely. So they had to look at their environment. They said, okay, if it was too cold here, we couldn't get enough skins to survive. We got to move south or where it's a little bit warmer. So they had to do really simple things sometimes in order to help themselves survive, or food supply, or shelter, or, with an enemy and all that kind of stuff. So you had to be incredibly adaptive throughout history in order to get to where we are. So congratulations. You are the product of thousands of years of great choices.
That's great. Everybody can feel happy about that. Right?
That's one thing we've got to say. We've survived this long, but it also, when change does happen, it's either going to be, to some people it's catastrophic. They lose their job or whatever after so many years and they don't know what to do. They've got to get up, put the big person pants on and get out there and try something, but also have an open mind. It's not just going to happen overnight because you're dealing with the old mental models you have in your head from what you learned before. No, it's a whole different reality now. So you've got to be able to go in, observe, see where you can, are you comfortable with taking advantage in this particular situation, working in this company, doing this thing for a living? Does it make you happy? You have this need to satisfy this humanity need where I'm doing good work. So I feel really great about it. I may be only making $100,000 to $200,000 a year, like us, as entrepreneurs, but we feel really good about what we're doing because there's some satisfaction in there. Anyway, so the long story short, AQ is about your adaptability to change and to things that are happening quickly. So, and the great thing is, imagine if you were a kid. I want you to channel back to when you were in grade school. Okay. Imagine if you had the confidence going forward that no matter what subject you took, whatever field of engineering or a doctorate, or you're going to become a fireman, garbage man, whatever, that you could do it and feel comfortable that you could always migrate to something else. It's not like you're one thing for life. If you were bad at it, then your whole life was a write-off. Imagine how you would feel as a kid knowing that no matter what happens in life, I'm going to feel confident. I'm going to be able to go and I'm going to be able to excel.
That's amazing. Cause you're right. Like that's exactly it. A lot of kids are the teachers and everything, the environment is a positive one. Is like, oh, you want to be a you want to be a firefighter, absolutely you can do that. Like, you want to be this, why not? Absolutely you can do that, right? But as you start getting older, people start putting restrictions on you. Yeah, you don't have the ability to do that. Oh, I don't think that's the right path for you. I think, whatever. So you start, putting yourself in this little box, or the society starts putting you in this little box of what you think needs and not to be done. You put yourself in one track mindset in that, right? And being able to overcome that, that's where the adaptability quotient comes in, which I think is going to be very valuable for people to know and understand. Is there any other tools that you wanted to talk about, to help people understand creativity or innovation, better?
Sure. Well, I'm just going to give you a quick little bit of advice. Just to recap, the first two I talked about, one was creative problem solving, and that was through Foursight. You could do a Foursight test. Great website. You could look at some information. That is number one tool to understand yourself as far as how you fit into the big picture, what your preferences are. Like, I know you're an ideator right now, and I'd bring you on the team for that. The second piece we just talked about was AQ. And we look at the AQ AI, you look at their models, lots of great information that's there. The third one I wanted to really talk about, and I briefly mentioned it, was the iDNA, which is the Innovator's DNA test that talks about your discovery or delivery quotient. It's funny, they have a free 20 question thing. I think maybe I said that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Just right away, when you took that test, did you know that you were of that percentage when you got the results?
I had an inkling.
Yeah.
But as I started going through, I was like, okay, this is a 5. This is a 5. This is a 5. Like, and you start kind of realizing, okay, so I guess I'm this is more of me than I thought it was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it'd also be nice if I found it's either some people really know where they sort of fit, and other people's it's a bit of a surprise. They look at it and go, man, I've got like 0 on the innovation side or on the ideation side or the discovery side. Am I doing this wrong? Am I scoring it wrong? No, this is just personal preference. You realize that you don't get excited about ideating or clarifying or discovering new things. At MIT, we call it novelty seeking. You have this wanderlust about trying and new things. Some people are totally comfortable with that, and that's great. But I could probably almost guarantee you they are not fabulous implementers on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one piece of software. If you want to investigate, you can ask I'll put this out there, maybe put a link in or something like that. The iDNA group, I've taken some advanced programs with them, and it's fascinating because it not only helps an entrepreneur understand where they sort of fit on the spectrum and where they need help or where they need support. It's great for a company that's a little bit larger, even more than say 10 people or so, to understand the dynamics within the company. So I would recommend they look at the Innovator's DNA as a way to sort of get a sort of pulse on where their company is, where they are in the ability for the innovation cycle. If they don't have a lot of people and they're finding they're struggling with coming up with new ideas, let's have a look at the profiles here. Maybe you need a little bit more infusion of the discovery gene or the novelty seeking, or what, bring in a facilitator and just have some ideas to spark out, to get people excited and interested about it. So that's what I would recommend. If you're having some problem, look at any one of these 3 tools, because they will be 2 things: a bit of self-discovery, and you'll understand. And sometimes, like yourself, you have a pretty good understanding of where you're at, but also it helps you sort of build that confidence that the team that you're building or you have is balanced enough to deliver something. And then maybe if you're not, it will give you a percentage wise of what areas you could do better in. So maybe you need to have, more people with ideate, and you bring in like a consultant or something, or you need an implementation. So you need somebody to help you with the supply chain. So it'll give you an idea of where you may be having some of the issues. So if you understand that and measure it, you've got a way to sort of say, hey, we need to improve this section. Let's go seek the help that we need for that. So it's really almost like a checkup at the doctor kind of thing, where you go there, you want to make sure everything's good. It's not relying on, I just don't know why things are happening. Well, hey, let's sit down and figure out what's going on with your company or your idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that I think is very valuable. Like it's being able to internally, interoception, basically, right? Look at yourself, because it is right. I did have an inkling as to who I was, right? But what I didn't know is that by the time that I got to the end and actually looked at it, and I was like, okay, there's a very big gap here, because I am a solopreneur, if you will, right? As a consultant and stuff like that. I'm great at ideation, but clearly I'm lacking something, right? I can very clearly see it now, which before I didn't know. Before I thought it was just me, that I was doing something wrong, but I was like, okay, maybe it's not me. Maybe I need to gather that team that I didn't know I needed to gather before, right? And that was hugely helpful.
Yeah, and you can get lots of help that doesn't have to be you hiring a bunch of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you're going to seek out some free help, but then you'll see whether, if it's strong enough, then you'll figure out a way to import some of that in.
Yeah,
and that's for not just the solopreneur. That's for even large companies. I've done some like work with Starbucks and places like that. They need some help like that.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Can you spell, I guess, the idea for, you said Foursight? I just want to make sure that it's like
Four.
FOUR.
Yeah. SIGHT.
Okay.
And basically, because it's the 4 elements, right?
Yeah.
That basically have been proven. Now, it just to sort of give them some significance, that work's been based on, have you ever brainstormed in a situation?
I have, yeah.
That original, like the term brainstorming and the whole process was created by the guys that created, like, originally 60 years ago, the work on Foursight. So they've taken the concept of brainstorming and what that did and built it into this examination with lots of research, like thousands of papers on it. So it's not just one person's idea. This has got a lot of validated research. So it's Foursight.com, and it's basically thinking profiles. Very great site, great people out of Buffalo. They just come up with a couple of new books on team building and so forth. But very, very simple concept. And that's more about self-discovery, understanding about where you feel comfortable, in the cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's some great resources that you were able to kind of mention to us. There's the Innovator's DNA, which is a book and a website, right?
Yeah, and a great website. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually the Foursight, like you said. There's iDNA test as well, iDNA group, right? And for people interested in learning more about you, or want to hear more about you, like where can they find you? Where can they?
Probably the best way is you can reach me through my website, and it's basically just my name. So it's Kelly, Kelly, E for my middle initial, and you get a bonus point if you can ever guess my middle name. And last name is Parke with an E at the end, so Parke. So the whole thing is Kelly, Parke, Parke.com. And that'll just give you sort of the ideas of where I'm at, contact me, what I'm doing. And you can just look me up on LinkedIn. I guarantee if you put the name in Kelly Parke with an E at the end, I'll pop up there somewhere, hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put a lot of this information in the show notes, all the links, everything that we kind of talked about, all the resources, including your website and your LinkedIn and stuff like that. We'll put that all in the show notes. But for the people that are listening that want to do it right away, right, then that is obviously possible.
Sure.
And is there anything? Yeah.
No, good. I just want to say, this has been a fantastic opportunity to have a chance to talk, because that's how I, gather new information, new ideas, just through conversation and talking to people, but also listening a lot. Right. So that's, don't feel afraid to contact me. Anybody that's reaching out to the different pieces, because, I'm there to network with people, but also it constantly helps me generate new ideas by just having conversations with people. I'm not going to steal your ideas if we talk about ideas, but as far as working through the concept, because sometimes it's really something simple that will turn the difference in your company. You get to check out one extra website, or you get one other line of thought that you want to pursue, and it leads you to that diamond moment. So you were asking me earlier, what if I don't see any diamonds? Keep looking.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things I wrote down, like I have a bunch of things that I wrote down about what you said, but the idea of like boiling everything down, right, to asking more questions, right, and influencing each other, going and find people to influence each other and relate all that stuff to your life, right, in terms of not copying, but like using your life as a way to kind of come up with those ideas. I think that those 3 points right there is what makes something creative and something innovative. You pair that with all the tools that you mentioned, and I think you have something really powerful, really, really powerful. So I thank you very much, Kelly. And I hope we get to, because there's a lot of things that I researched that we didn't touch on. It'd be very interesting to actually continue to talk to you and dive deeper into a lot of these subjects, because it's fascinating. Fascinating, absolutely.
If you're still, hopefully things are going well for you, let's have an update a few months from now.
Yeah,
Because
that'd be
there'll always
great.
be
Fantastic.
something new. That's the cool thing. There'll never be any lack of things.
Exactly.
And next time we'll talk more about rock and roll, because I've got some great stories to tell you.
Awesome. Can't wait. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Kelly. It's been great.
Thank you.